Hi, I'm Gary Fincher, and I want to have a discussion here on taxation. Now, this isn't your ordinary or typical discussion on taxes. This video is not going to be dry or boring, so stay tuned. And I would say it's more thought-provoking than anything. My discussion is more conceptual, and I'm going to steer the focus back to taxation from a logical sequence. And I'm going to start with the ethical consideration. That's where I'm going to start. So many have gotten the issue backwards and inside out, and I think this video is very much needed. Now, recently I tried to have a discussion about taxation in concept, and although I was having this discussion with a political neophyte, so she can be given a pass for not having thought through all the issues, the conversation did leapfrog or skip ahead to where the money is spent. Now, an interesting sleight of hand just happened there, if you'll notice. That is, it skipped ahead to where the money was spent, as if the ethical consideration of who the funds belong to had already been addressed. Funny how that happened, huh? But the way I look at it is logic and ethics demand that you must first determine who owns or who's entitled to the money before you can address who spent the money, let alone where it gets spent, let alone if the spending is good or bad. A few years ago, I worked on a petition drive in Massachusetts to eliminate the state income tax. People were coming up and screaming at me saying, "Oh, you can't get rid of taxes." Why not? Because those taxes go for X, Y, and Z. Now, ironically, they'd rattle off things that taxes get spent on that would get paid for no matter what. Tax system or free market or you name it kind of system that would get paid for it. Invariably, they'd be making this desperate attempt to appeal to my practical side by saying the money gets spent on schools and roads and police. But the one common denominator that I noticed is that the argument always sought to defend taxes based on where the funds went, what it got spent on. But it seems kind of fishy to me that someone would start in like the middle of a sequence. So I'd say, hey, now wait a minute. Let's first go to step one before we spend time dwelling on step two. Let's not put the cart before the horse. So this is what I told people, as this chart illustrates. This is step one. Who does the money belong to? This is step two. Where does the money get spent? Now this determines who gets to spend the money, and this determines where the one who gets to spend the money spends the money. And then you go on to step three. Is the spending good or bad, or is it wise or unwise? But first, you have to establish something in step one. You cannot define step one by... Step two cannot define step one. That doesn't make sense. Okay, for an illustration, let's say that I grabbed a handbag full of money from an old lady in a park and someone witnessed it and asked me if the contents of that bag belonged to the old lady. Now, my answer could be, well, the money in the handbag is going to be spent on some new shoes, a bicycle for my kid, my friend's root canal. So as you can see, the money is mine. That wouldn't make sense, would it? I suspect the one that caught me taking the handbag isn't going to swallow that answer, because it really didn't answer the question. He wants to know what's occurring in step one. Until then, step two is irrelevant. He's going to say, no, let's first settle who the handbag full of money belongs to. Okay, back to my real life experience. Now, for some strange reason, all the people, and they were numerous, that came at me defending the tax and rattling off all the things the tax money is spent on, none of these people would engage me when I ask a simple favor to help me address who the money belongs to, which is step one. Does it belong to the state or the taxing entity? Or does it belong to the wage earner or the business owner, or the person that owned the money, who had the money, who had it prior to being taken? Now please note that for the sake of this video, I'm not necessarily saying that the state or the taxing entity isn't the rightful owner of the property. Now I do have an ethics theory that I feel confident does prove or demonstrate step one, who owns the funds, and it's not necessarily the government. You might have a good idea of where I'm going with this, but you'll have to watch one of my other videos for that one. But for now, I'm not even quarreling over the spending of the money if the state is determined as the rightful owner of the money. But let's do first things first. I mean, shoot straight at me and come at me with your best case you've got if you feel your case of who owns the money is superior to mine. In other words, if I take the position that the wage earner is the rightful owner of the property, and you're taking the position that the state is the rightful owner of the property, then come on, let's have that discussion. Let's hash it out. Prove me wrong. Prove how I'd be wrong. Give me a sound argument that makes sense. In this video, I'm not staking out a position on step one, but what I am saying is let's delve into it. Let's get to the bottom of it, and let's do it in the right sequence. At step one, don't come at me at step two and try to make like the spending alone is a determinant of who the money belongs to, sweeping step one under the rug. This bears repeating. You can't point to where the funds are spent as a way of justifying who owns the money. It's the other way around. First, you have to settle who owns the money. Duh. But yet I see virtually everyone skipping over step one and going right to step two, as though if they can convince me on step two and step three, I won't notice that they've conveniently glossed over step one. Actually, they just go ahead and point to step two as if it's the only one that matters. They just actually go ahead and assume step three is decided too, when we haven't even resolved step one, let alone step two. Now, if you're one of those people that do this, what I find really arrogant is that when you point to step two and then you go ahead and assume step three, while you're making an implication that step one has already been resolved in your favor and not in mine. How did this happen? What did we do or talk about to establish this? How did that work? For that matter, let me back up a little bit. If you tell me that taxes are justified because the state spends the money on schools, well, what if I pipe up and said, so will I? I'll spend the money on schools. Did I just throw a monkey wrench into your argument? I mean, now you've got both parties, the state and me, claiming that we'll spend the money on schools. Who owns the money in that case, if you're going to use step two? Obviously, step two can't be a standard for determining legit ownership. Now, I'm trying to be very fair here. I might very well agree on the spending you're talking about. I might very well say, yeah, I'm with you. Let's spend the money on X, Y, and Z. But I need to first know who the money, and I'm talking about any money universally, belongs to. I mean, if we hash it out and it's determined that the state is the rightful owner of the property, then I might very well agree with you. And say, hey, yeah, it's their money, let them spend it. But if we hash out the question and it's determined that the wage earner is the rightful owner, then the state does not get to spend it, not even on schools and roads. We have to take things in logical sequence. Step one, step two, step three. How come no one has the heart to go at it with me with a case that they know who the rightful owner of the money is and that they can demonstrate this in a reasoned argument? If I take one position and you think that you can smash or debunk my case, then bring it on. Give me a cogent, sound, rational argument that supports your case and undermines mine. Prove to me how I'm wrong. Then we'll go on to step 2. Okay?